Hi, my name is Katie. I'm one of the children's librarians with the Lexington Public Library. Today, I'm going to show you how you can make your very own book corner bookmark. This looks rather bland and bare, but when we are done, I'll show you how you can customize it for a number of the books that you've read. This project just needs a few supplies. I have paper. It's 8.5 by 11 size copier paper. You could also utilize notebook paper or whatever you have lying around. I will need a pair of scissors, a glue stick, and I used markers to decorate my bookmarks. You could also use crayons or colored pencils. You can utilize colored paper if you have it, but I don't. So I'm just going to use a very simple blank white sheet of paper. If you use the entire paper, you can make either one large bookmark that goes over a good portion of your title, or two smaller corner bookmarks, which don't take up quite as much room. This project can be found on Red Ted Art. As a librarian, my job is to connect people with either books or other materials that they can read for education or entertainment, and also with activities and crafts. Currently, we're doing activities and crafts at home because no one is able to come into the libraries. This one is a really fun thing. I'm going to show you how to create the bookmarks and how to match them to each of the books that you've read. I have 5 books here and then one extra bookmark. And I'd like to see if anyone knows what book this one is supposed to be for. Add it in the comments and see if anybody can guess the correct title. So, what we do, first take your piece of paper and lay it flat on the table. You're going to fold it in half. I'm going to make a couple of smaller bookmarks out of this one. If you are making one large bookmark, you would not start with this first step. You would start with the next one. So, fold the edges together, make sure your corners line up. I'm not particularly adept at origami and being very precise myself, but the more that you can try, the better off you will be. I have a couple of tricks for this. If you are good at origami, then this will be natural to you. If you are like me, use the tricks. They really help. So once you've lined up the edges over here, put your hand in the middle and run your other hand to the other side of the paper. And then you will have made a nice smooth crease that is nice and straight and not all wonky on the other side of the paper. Now, you've created your very own book. You could go ahead and write in that. I'm gonna mark this page. Oh yes, that's exactly where I stopped. Or take it and use that line as your guide to cut your page in half. Feel free to watch me go slowly. Precision, as I said, not my forte, but that's all right. All right, now we have two rectangular half sheets of paper. You're going to take one of them and fold the top right corner down to about the middle of, a little bit less, over to the middle of the bottom. You want to make sure that this corner is, the triangle points line up nice and neatly. Otherwise, your bookmark will be somewhat askew. And again, once you've matched the edges, take your hand and then slide it up and then along, so you'll have a nice crease there. So, now you have another shape. We do not need this additional triangle or this additional rectangle for the bookmark itself, although I would hold on to it because I've utilized this scrap piece of paper to add details to each of my bookmarks. So now you have, if you unfold it, you have a nice little square. two triangular shapes, keep them folded together, lay it flat like this, and you are going to fold the bottom two corners up to the very top in the middle. Again, keep your edges as neat as possible. Fold it down nice and tight, and fold up the left-hand side now. You could have done the left-hand side first. Both ways will work. Try to get these as close to flush as possible. It will make a little bit easier on the last couple of steps if everything is as square as possible. Now you have a tiny square or a triangle with flaps. If you unfold those flaps, you'll notice that you still have that large triangle, but you have the shape of a square in the center. You're going to take the top layer of that square, because you still have two sides to this bookmark piece, the top of that square, and fold the corner down to the very middle. Increase it nicely. And then, so now you have a triangle with a folded down crease. What we're going to do now is we're going to take these two corner pieces and fold them up and in. This will create a little bit of a pocket. So fold one side up, and fold it over and tuck it in as much and as neatly as you possibly can. And then fold the other one. This one will be a little bit tighter because you've already created the pocket. Fold it over, squish that in there. And there, you have created a corner bookmark. This is really great because it can go over the top of your page. Just slides right over the top. And there, you know exactly where you stopped. It doesn't crease pages. It keeps your library books or books of your own looking nice. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. But if you wanted to adapt this a little so that you could create a bookmark to go with the book that you're reading, well, here are a couple of different ways. So my first bookmark and book were for The First Case by Ulf Nilsson, and Gittesby has illustrated the entire work. This is a great read aloud, or it would be wonderful for a kid in 2nd through 4th grade to be able to read on their own. The text is not particularly heavy, and the story is just charming. The toad and the mouse are members of the police force and have to find the case of the missing nuts. And throughout the entire text, they are constantly eating little cakes. And what kind of little cake is better than a little cupcake? Well, there we go. For this particular bookmark, I took our regular form. I cut the triangular piece out of my extra page and scalloped along the edge, and then glued it over the top of my bookmark. And then cut very, very, very carefully along this top, because if you do it too much, your bookmark will fall to pieces. I also created a little bit of, I cut down along the bottom in a little bit of a square shape to make the cupcake liner underneath. This one has loads of frosting on it. My next story is Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume, and it was published in 1972, and it has stood the test of time. This one is a really fantastic story to read aloud again, or I highly recommend it for any kid in 4th grade. It's the tale of Peter and his little brother Fudge. And little brother Fudge is a wild card. He does all sorts of zany, crazy activities. And Peter, well, he's a fairly good sport, but he's a little exhausted by his brother. I remember reading this when I was a kid, and I remembered a lot about a turtle. So for this one, we created a turtle bookmark. You could use colored paper if you've got it, but I didn't. So I just colored this side of the corner bookmark with some blue and green to create water. I colored the top of it brown and put some geometric shapes to make it look as though it's the top of a turtle shell. I used that scrap of extra paper to color and cut out some turtle legs or fins. And then I cut out a head, but I gave it a little extra piece down at the bottom for stability, because you glue it on the top and then fold it, glue this part as well and fold it under, and that way it's more secure. My next story has been in my house for a long time, and this is Pippi Longstocking. It's by Astrid Lindgren, and it is the story of a spunky, charming young girl who's incredibly strong, probably a little bit zany, and the two kids who live next door to her who find her fascinating. Pippi has carrot red hair that sticks straight out to the sides in her braids, and so I created a bookmark that has braids attached to the side. I took our regular corner bookmark, turned it around so that, here's my bookmark, angled it a little, and then rounded the sides very carefully to create more of a face shape. On this one, I just drew on the hair on the top of her head, her eyes, some freckles in her mouth, and then out of that extra bookmark shape, I cut out a couple of braids to hang onto the side. Now, on this bookmark, the braids go in two different spots. One of them you glue on the outside of the corner bookmark. The other, in order to make sure that the corner bookmark can still open, because if you glued it right here, it would glue your bookmark shut. You tuck it under and put it right there. I put a little scrap of paper over the top because my glue stick was very sticky, and so I didn't want it to stick to the corner bookmark. That way you have a spot for it there. And then you just put it over the top of your page, and you know exactly where you left off. My next title is probably for I'd say 5th grade and up. It's a bit of a ghost story. It's called The Forgotten Girl. It's by India Hill Brown. It's actually fairly new. It came out last year. This is the story of a couple of friends who go out and play in the snow late one night when they're not supposed to be out, and they trip over a grave. Well, it turns out that it's not just one grave, but a whole graveyard that has been abandoned for years. And then one of them is followed by the ghost of the girl in the forgotten grave. She really just wants to be remembered. That's the basic story behind it all. So for this one, I created my little ghosty bookmark. This one, again, this was probably the simplest bookmark that I created. This one is basically just our regular shape, and then I just curled the edges just a little bit and created some scalloping down on the bottom, and I put 2 big circles there for ghost eyes. This one was a little bit spooky, I have to say. It was a really interesting read. It was, if you are at all interested in anything historical, there's a little bit of historical. This is not historical fiction, but there's definitely a bit of history to this one, and it's also just spooky. And my last title, I actually don't have a book for, because I read this one on an ebook, and it was wonderful. This is called The Blackbird Girls. It's by Anne Blankman. If you have read The War That Saved My Life or anything by Alan Gratz, this one would be an excellent choice. This is set just after the Chernobyl disaster, and 2 girls who lived in the town who then have to escape so that they won't be harmed by the radiation in the town. And they were enemies to begin with, but the experience and all that they go through change them into friends. It's a really interesting story. Again, there is a little bit of history that goes along here. This is a historical event. The Chernobyl disaster happened in 1986. But there's also some flashbacks to scenes from World War II. So if you're interested in that, it would definitely be a really good story. It is a bit painful. There are definitely some really hard aspects of life. One of the girls has a family that is absolutely wretched, but it's still a hopeful story in the end. And then this one required zero amount of scissors other than to cut the paper, but I just made my own Blackbird. I'm not particularly artistic, and I was very proud of this one. So really, I just drew the shape of a bird that was flying over the sides of the bookmark. And then if I ever have the book for this, I'll be able to put it over the edge. All right, and I said I had one more bookmark shape. Does anybody know what that one might be? If you do know, share it with us. Use the hashtag LPLAtHome, or you can comment on this video post. I'd like to see what your guesses are. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that you have learned a little today and maybe have a new book to read, and that you can go and make your very own book corner bookmarks.